Last time you were on, Hugh, you were CEO, Chief Executive. Now you're CIO, Chief Investment Officer. What happened to your career?
It's gone sideways or down. So I was the founder of the business. I owned the business. And I was the janitor, the CEO, the CIO, the IR officer, etc. And perhaps it was too much. So I needed an adult to run my business. I have to say I am breaking one of the rules because my CEO has banned me from media. I'm not sure if he knows where I was going when I sneaked out of the office. I'm doing it for you, Evan.
That's very kind of you. Well, let's get straight into the economics, because we have an intense crisis in the Eurozone. We have a dreadful catch-22 in much of the world, including the US and the UK. Economies that need to borrow less to find a sustainable path to growth, but need to find a sustainable path to growth in order to get their borrowing down. Now, I'm interested in your takes, not just because you might have studied economics at some point in your career, but more as people who run things. How scared are you? Should we be treating this as a time for emergency measures? Let's start with you, Guy.
Scared is not the word we have for now. We are concerned. But, besides looking at the headline and what's happening in the macro world of finance, we also look at what our customers are telling us.
Because you're a barometer in a way.
Well, we have over 6 million SMEs use our products throughout the world, and we actually survey them quite frequently. We have put together something which is called the Sage Business Index, in which we measure what they think about the economy and what they think about their business outlook. And the vision about the global economy has clearly deteriorated over the past 6 months, is the result of this survey. We've asked over 10,000 small businesses throughout the world, so it's significant. They also think that the state of their local economy is worse than 6 months ago, but interestingly, their outlook has not deteriorated. And so if you're looking for any sign of hope, that is one that Sage can see today when talking to its customers.
All right, Brent, is this an emergency?
Fundamentally, as an entrepreneur, one has to be an optimist. Or most entrepreneurs are optimists, but worried optimists. But in essence, I think what I've seen in my businesses is actually you do need to create, even in small ones, you need to create a crisis to get stuff done sometimes. And so I think making sure that people see that actually if nothing is done, it is a crisis, is very powerful, and possibly the only way that enough will be done to get it sorted.
Hugh?
I don't like the language that embodies emergency. It's emotive, and the debate with regard to the economy is becoming overwhelmed by emotive terms such as fairness. I'm sure we'll come to that. We're not in a recession in the UK. We're in a depression. A depression is a period where it takes the economy many years to get back to the level of activity that we saw back in 2006 and 2007. We're not at those levels, and it's five years have passed, and 5 years might pass again before we regain that level. It's an enormously serious situation that requires cold calculation.
Let's focus on the Eurozone, which is probably the most intense of the different crises that one can focus on if you want to choose from the challenges facing the world. How serious does one think that the world has to go in adopting measures in the Eurozone to sort it out? I mean, fiscal union seemed like some distant dream of the most enthusiastic Europeans 5 years ago. Now people are talking about it as though it needs to be delivered by Sunday afternoon.
If you take a slightly optimistic view, Europe, the EU, has always progressed through a set of crises. You can take a more negative view, which is there is no way public opinions are going to accept fiscal union. Question is whether they will be asked. And, I'm not a politician. I can't quite see how that might work.
You're too optimistic.
Go on, thank you.
We've reached a very rare moment in economic history where the problem is greater than the ability of the politicians to respond. And they're lashing out, they're angry, and they're angry at people like myself being, if you will, a speculator. There is no policy prescription that they can offer that will redeem the situation. The redemption will come through the population of Greece and elsewhere throwing the politicians out and rejecting the euro ideal.
That is not a simple step because maintaining a banking system in which most of their deposits and savings exist is going to be very difficult in that situation. The debts of their companies are denominated in euros. They can move to a new drachma, but if I'm owed money by a Greek company, I'll say, you know what, I'll take it in euros rather than in your new drachma.
Absolutely.
So all the Greek private sector goes bust at the same time.
Bankruptcy is a solution. There's too much debt. And the creditors who extended that debt, that was a folly, that was a misjudgment. And all this firefighting is trying to protect the creditors who made those loans as opposed to the oppressed person who is being fired, and who's seeing the education system closed down, the health system closed down. Greece needs a real exchange rate, if you go on holiday and you have a beer, it'll cost you £5. No one's rushing to go there in the UK. If you go and it's drachma and it's 50 pence, there's a stimulus that is not open to them today. And I think eventually they will pull the ripcord. It will be painful. It will be enormously painful. There isn't a solution which isn't painful. No. At least that is a remedy.
Over the summer, I've learned, reading a paper, that within the dollar zone in North America, in the US, default by cities, potentially by state, is possible, and they remain inside the US dollar. So I thought, well, why would Greece not default, but not necessarily have to exit the euro? If one of the states or regions or company goes overboard in terms of debt, default is a natural outcome. So, the possibility of default within the euro, it could potentially exist. Ramifications of that to be discussed. That's happened in the US. What's never happened in the US is like a big state like California goes bust. But it could, in principle,
It could, Guy, but the big difference, despite the perilous state of California, is that the magnitude of their debt versus the size of that economy is actually very small when you compare it to a European sovereign. It's probably in the order of 25% of the size of the economy, whereas in Greece we're talking about 125, 140%. That's the difference.